One plant produces the exact same mineral compound sold in every hardware store for pest control, and it grows back every spring without replanting. Another one tested 10 times more effective than the most widely used insect repellent on the market, and a major university published the results while the product industry looked the other way. And at the end of this video, you will know 5 plants that replace almost everything the pest control industry sells you without a single chemical. Hi, I am Harry, and welcome to Garden Explained with Harry. The pest control industry in the United States generates over $22 billion a year. The average American household spends between $200 and $400 annually on sprays, traps, foggers, and professional treatments. Most of those products contain synthetic pyrethroids, organophosphates, or neonicotinoids. The Environmental Protection Agency classifies dozens of common indoor pesticides as probable carcinogens or endocrine disruptors. The National Institutes of Health published data showing measurable pesticide residue inside 89% of American homes tested. That is the house you sleep in. That is the air your children breathe. But before 1945, none of this existed. Every household on every continent managed pests with plants, mineral dusts, and botanical preparations that worked for centuries. The chemical industry did not solve a new problem. It replaced a system that already worked, and then made sure you forgot the original ever existed. If a plant can kill an insect mechanically through physical contact that no species can evolve past, why would you ever pay for a chemical that does it through poison? There is a product most gardeners already know: diatomaceous earth, a fine white powder made from the fossilized shells of ancient microscopic algae called diatoms. It kills insects not through chemistry, but through physics. The tiny silica particles in the powder scratch and abrade the waxy lipid layer that covers an insect's exoskeleton. That layer is what keeps moisture inside the body. Once it is compromised, the insect loses water uncontrollably and dies from desiccation within 24 to 72 hours. No toxin involved, no resistance possible. You cannot evolve past a knife. Now here is what the hardware store will never put on the label. There is a living plant that produces the exact same compound. It is called horsetail, Equisetum arvense. It has been growing on this planet for over 300 million years, longer than any flowering plant alive today. Researchers at the Max Planck Institute used electron microscopy to map the silica structures inside horsetail stems and found organized nanoparticle formations embedded in the outer cell walls. Sape and colleagues published this in the Journal of Analytical and Bioanalytical Chemistry in 2008. The silica. Content in dried horsetail ranges between 10 and 25% of total dry weight. That is the highest concentration of any land plant on Earth. Holzhuter, Narayanan, and Gerber confirmed this as with scanning electron imaging, showing knob-shaped silica protrusions along the stem surface that function as natural microabrasive structures. The European Union certified Equisetum arvense decoction as an approved organic fungicide under Regulation EC 834/2007. Rudolf Steiner documented horsetail tea as a fungal suppressant in biodynamic agriculture in 1924. That is a full century of recorded field use. In practice, you dry the stems, grind them into fine powder, and dust along baseboards, windowsills, cabinet interiors, and door thresholds. The silica particles work exactly like store-bought diatomaceous earth against ants, silverfish, fleas, bedbug nymphs, and cockroach juveniles. For mold, you simmer the stems for 20 minutes, strain the liquid, let it cool, and spray it on bathroom grout, basement walls, and windowsill edges. The silica film left behind inhibits mold spore germination and slows mycelial growth on contact. The plant itself spreads through underground rhizomes. You plant it once. It comes back every year. One patch of horsetail growing along a fence line produces more usable pest and mold defense material than a shelf full of products you would otherwise buy in a store. In 2001, 2 researchers at Iowa State University published a finding that should have changed the entire insect repellent market overnight. Chris Peterson and Joel Coates tested the essential oil of a common garden plant against DEET, the active ingredient in nearly every commercial mosquito repellent sold worldwide. They presented their results at the 222nd National Meeting of the American Chemical Society. The compound they tested is called nepetalactone. It is the primary volatile oil found in the leaves of catnip. Nepetacateria. Their data showed that nepetalactone repelled Aedes aegypti mosquitoes at concentrations 10 times lower than DEET, 10 times more effective, from a plant that grows in sidewalk cracks. Science News reported on the study. Entomology departments across the country cited it. And then nothing happened. The insect repellent market continued selling DEET-based products worth over $4 billion globally. 5 years later, Schultz, Peterson, and Coates published again in Environmental Entomology, confirming nepetalactone also repels German cockroaches at low concentrations. Zhu and colleagues at the USDA extended the findings in 2009, showing efficacy against stable flies. Bernier and the USDA Agricultural Research Service demonstrated that nepetalactone works as a spatial repellent, meaning it does not require skin contact. A potted plant releasing the compound into the air creates a zone of protection around it. That single finding changes everything about how you can use this plant. You place potted catnip at every entry point, doorways, window ledges, patio edges. The plant releases nepetalactone continuously while it grows. For direct skin protection, you crush a handful of fresh leaves and rub them on exposed arms and ankles. The effect lasts 30 to 45 minutes before reapplication. For kitchen and pantry defense, you dry the leaves, fill small cloth pouches, and place them inside drawers, cabinets, and storage bins. Cockroaches and pantry moths avoid the scent. For evening patio use, you steep 1 cup of fresh leaves in 2 cups of boiled water for 15 minutes. Strain it into a spray bottle and mist outdoor furniture and screen doors. The plant self-seeds aggressively, tolerates poor soil, and produces harvestable leaf mass from early spring to first frost. One planting gives you years of continuous repellent supply at zero recurring cost. Those are 2 plants, 2 out of dozens that do this. And here are 5 more that work through the same principles of mechanical defense, volatile oil repellency, and antimicrobial suppression.
Think about what happens every June. Drugstores in Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, and Miami all do the same thing. They move the insect repellent to the front of the store, bright yellow cans, green labels promising protection. Families walk in, grab a can or 2, and walk out without thinking twice. They have done this every summer for decades. Their parents did it before them. The ritual feels permanent, like mosquitoes and chemical spray have always gone together. But they have not. The active ingredient in most of those cans is a compound called DEET. It was not invented for backyard barbecues. The United States Army, working with the USDA, developed it following their experiences in World War II to protect soldiers from mosquito-borne illnesses in jungle combat zones. The compound they created was powerful. It was also a solvent. It dissolves plastic. It eats through synthetic fabric. It strips the finish off wooden furniture. That is the substance you rub into your forearms before sitting on the porch. DEET enters your bloodstream within 2 hours of skin application. Researchers have detected it in human urine samples. The Environmental Protection Agency classifies it as slightly toxic. It washes off in the shower and enters municipal water systems. Government scientists found DEET in roughly 75% of surface water samples across the United States. The chemical designed for soldiers in the Pacific jungle now flows through watersheds in Ohio, Virginia, and California. We spray it on our children, and then we wash it into the water supply. The option existed before DEET was ever invented. In the early 2000s, a pair of entomologists in the Midwest ran an experiment that should have changed everything. They set up a controlled laboratory apparatus with 2 chambers and released Aedes aegypti mosquitoes into it. This is the species responsible for transmitting dengue fever, Zika virus, and yellow fever. This is not a nuisance mosquito. This is a killer. One chamber was treated with DEET at the standard consumer concentration. The other was treated with a compound extracted from a common plant. A plant you have seen 1,000 times. A plant sold in pet stores. A plant growing in sidewalk cracks and empty lots in virtually every state in the country. The plant is catnip. Yes. The same plant in the cat aisle at PetSmart. The same plant your neighbor grows in a pot that her tabby rolls around in every afternoon. Nepeta cataria, a member of the mint family. Available in every garden center for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. The compound is called Nepeta-lactone, and when those researchers compared it to DEET, the results were not close. In that laboratory test, it took 1/10 the amount of Nepeta-lactone to achieve the same initial repellent effect as DEET. It was 10 times more potent in a controlled environment. The researchers presented these findings at the largest chemistry conference in the United States. Science journalists reported the results. Then something remarkable happened. Nothing, no product launches, no headlines on the evening news, no reformulation by Off or Repel or any major brand. The $6 billion industry that should have cared the most simply continued selling the same cans with the same military solvent inside. The study has been publicly available for more than 20 years. You are only hearing about it now. The plant you bought for $3 to entertain your cat contains a compound that outperforms the most widely sold mosquito repellent on Earth by a factor of 10. And for a long time, major corporations struggled to turn it into a long-lasting commercial product you could buy. The reason is not complicated. It is arithmetic. DEET is manufactured in chemical plants in Jacksonville, Florida, and Greensboro, North Carolina, and industrial facilities across China and India. It requires petroleum derivatives, specialized reactors, quality control laboratories, regulatory filings, branded packaging, national distribution networks, and multi-million-dollar advertising campaigns. Every single step in that chain generates revenue for someone. Every step creates a job. Every step justifies a budget line. Catnip grows in a crack in a sidewalk. You cannot patent a plant that has been growing wild for thousands of years. You cannot build a subscription model around something that self-seeds every autumn and comes back every spring without asking. You cannot charge $23 for a product your customer can grow in a coffee can on a fire escape in Brooklyn. The economics do not work. Not for the manufacturer, not for the retailer, not for the shareholders. They work beautifully for you. They just do not work for anyone trying to sell you something. So the industry did not suppress catnip. It did something more effective. It ignored it. It funded studies on its own compounds. It filled the shelf space at Home Depot and Walmart and Target. The absence of catnip from those shelves is not the result of a secret meeting in a boardroom. It is the result of a system that only amplifies what it can sell. Now let me tell you what Nepeta-lactone actually does to a mosquito. Because this is not simply a smell they dislike, this is something much more violent. Most people assume that mosquito repellents work by masking your scent. DET partially functions this way. It interferes with the mosquito's ability to detect the carbon dioxide you exhale, which is the primary signal they use to locate you. It makes you harder to find. But it does not make you painful to approach. Catnip does. Nepetalactone activates a specific receptor in insects called TRPA1. This is an irritant receptor. In humans, this same receptor is what fires when you are exposed to tear gas. It is what makes your eyes burn when you cut a raw onion. It is what makes wasabi feel like it is attacking the inside of your skull. When a mosquito encounters nepetalactone in the air, its TRPA1 receptors fire. The insect experiences something equivalent to flying into a cloud of tear gas. This is not mild discomfort. This is neurological alarm. The mosquito's entire system screams at it to reverse course and leave the area immediately. This is why crushed catnip does not just reduce the number of mosquitoes that land on you, it clears the zone. And the behavioral observation that mosquitoes flee from catnip is not new. Folk herbalists across England, France, and Germany planted catnip near doorways for centuries. Families in rural Appalachia rubbed the leaves on their arms before working in fields. Communities in parts of Iran and Central Asia used plants in the same genus to keep biting insects away from sleeping quarters. They did not know about TRPA1 receptors. They watched what happened and they repeated what worked. The science caught up 300 years later. And mosquitoes are not the only insects that flee from catnip. The same receptor exists in flies, cockroaches, and stable flies that plague livestock. Researchers found that nepetalactone repels certain tick species. Tick populations are expanding across the northeastern United States every year. Lyme disease cases have tripled in 2 decades. And a plant that repels the insect carrying it grows wild in the same forest where people pick up ticks on their ankles every summer. One plant, multiple threats, 0 chemicals. So now you know what the plant is, you know what it does. The only question left is how to turn this into a permanent mosquito repellent supply. That never runs out and never costs you another dollar. Catnip is a perennial herb in the mint family. It grows back every single year without replanting. It is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9. That covers nearly the entire continental United States from northern Minnesota to southern Texas. It covers most of the United Kingdom, Central Europe, and temperate climates across Asia and Australia. It grows in poor soil, rich soil, clay, sand, and rocky ground that would kill most garden plants in a week. It tolerates drought once established. It tolerates neglect. It tolerates gardeners who forget it exists for 3 months and then suddenly remember they own it. These are not the characteristics of a delicate herb garden specimen. These are the characteristics of a survival plant. If you are starting from seed, sow directly into soil after your last frost date. Catnip seeds need light to germinate. Do not bury them. Press them gently onto the soil surface and mist with water. Germination takes 7 to 14 days. If you do not want to wait, walk into any garden center. You will find catnip seedlings for $2 to $4. Plant the seedling, water it once, walk away. That is the entire process. A single plant produces hundreds of seeds each fall. Those seeds drop to the ground and overwinter in the soil. The following spring, they germinate without your involvement. By year 2, your single plant has become a dozen. By year 3, you have a patch. By year 5, you have a permanent supply that renews itself every season like clockwork. You will never buy another can of repellent. The plant handles everything. For apartment dwellers, a 12-inch pot on a balcony or patio is sufficient. Grow your repellent in the exact location where you need it. Yes, cats will find your catnip. Grow it in hanging baskets or elevated planters they cannot reach. Place wire cages over ground plants during establishment, or simply grow enough that the cats take their share and you still have plenty. Most cats settle into a routine after the first few weeks and the plants recover between visits. Now here is how you turn the living plant into active repellent on your skin. Pick 5 to 8 fresh leaves, crush them between your palms, roll them aggressively between your fingers. You will feel the leaves bruise and go damp. a sharp minty smell will hit you. That is nepetalactone releasing from the broken cell walls of the leaf. Rub the crushed material directly onto your forearms, ankles, neck, and behind your ears. These are the zones mosquitoes target because blood vessels run close to the surface there. You can expect a brief window of solid repellent effect from a single application, but natural oils evaporate quickly, so you will need to reapply every 2 to 3 hours. The compound breaks down faster than synthetic chemicals in sunlight and body heat. That is the trade-off. You reapply with leaves from a plant that will never stop growing instead of reapplying from a can that will eventually run empty. For a more convenient method, steep a large handful of fresh leaves in just boiled water for 15 minutes. Strain, cool, and pour into a spray bottle. This catnip tea spray stores in your refrigerator for about a week. For patio defense, place catnip containers at the 4 corners of your outdoor seating area. When you sit down, crush the top growth on each plant with your hand. This releases a burst of nepetalactone into the surrounding air and creates a vapor perimeter around your table. For stronger effect, crush a bowl full of fresh leaves and place it at table center. You can layer your defense with companion planting. Lemon balm, lavender, and citronella grass each produce their own mild repellent compounds. But understand the hierarchy. The research puts catnip at 10 times DEET. The others operate at a fraction of that. Catnip is your anchor. The others are supporting players. Once your catnip establishes itself around your patio, you will have an annually returning repellent border. Every April, the plants push new growth. By June, they are full and producing nepetalactone again. You did nothing. You bought nothing. The plant remembered its job and showed up. This is the pattern that repeats across every industry that sells you a solution to a problem nature already solved. The omega-3 supplement market generates $4 billion a year selling you fish oil capsules, while a self-seeding plant called Perilla produces the highest omega-3 concentration ever recorded and grows back every spring on its own. The lawn fertilizer industry erased white clover from seed mixes so they could sell you the nitrogen that clover was producing for free. The same structure, the same logic. What cannot be owned cannot be sold. What cannot be sold disappears from public awareness. Catnip has been growing on this continent since European settlers brought it in the 1700s. It escaped their gardens within a generation. It naturalized across every temperate region. It has been here for 300 years, growing in meadows and roadsides and backyard edges, producing nepetalactone every single summer while Americans stood in checkout lines buying cans of DEET. The mosquitoes will come back next summer. They always do. And next May, you will have a choice. You can drive to the store and buy another can with the yellow label and the plastic safety cap and the ingredient list you have never read. You can spray a World War II-era solvent on your arms and your children's arms and tell yourself it is just what people do. Or you can walk to your patio, crush 3 leaves between your fingers, and solve the problem the way it could have been solved 20 years ago. The plant is already there. It has been waiting. Visit any ancient Shinto shrine in Kagoshima Prefecture in southern Japan. Walk past the stone torii gate and into the temple grounds. The first thing you notice is the AIR. It smells sharp, almost sweet, like eucalyptus crossed with something far older. The second thing you notice takes longer. It is an absence. The parking lot outside the gate was thick with mosquitoes. Inside the grove, there are none. No mosquitoes, no gnats, no flies circling your face. Visitors assume it is the incense burning inside the shrine hall. It is not the incense. Look up. The canopy above you belongs to trees older than most nations. Their trunks are enormous. Some are hollow with age, some are wide enough for a person to stand inside. The bark is rough and deeply furrowed. The leaves are glossy, dark green, and waxy. Tear one between your fingers and a sharp medicinal scent floods the air immediately. That scent is the answer. These trees have been releasing volatile compounds into the surrounding atmosphere since the day they were planted. Some of them have been doing this for 1,000 years without stopping. The oldest specimen in Japan stands in Kagoshima. It is estimated at over 3,000 years old. It is designated a national monument, and it has been repelling insects since before the Roman Empire existed. In Japan, they call this tree kusunoki. In China, they call it jang. Across Southeast Asia, from Vietnam to Indonesia, they call it copper. In India, traditional households have placed small blocks of its wood inside grain storage containers for centuries to keep rice beetles and pantry moths away from the food supply. Over 1 billion people across Asia live in proximity to this tree and understand exactly what it does. In the Western world, most people have never heard any of these names. This tree has no single identity in English. It has half a dozen different labels scattered across botanical references and forestry databases. None of them ever entered popular vocabulary. When a tree has no consistent name in the language that dominates global commerce, it has no consistent presence in stores and search engines or in public awareness. The fragmentation was not deliberate, but the result was erasure. The ancient record tells a different story. In 1578, the Chinese physician Li Shizhen completed the Bencao Gangmu. It is one of the most comprehensive medical encyclopedias in human history, nearly 2,000 entries, decades of research. The text documented this tree's properties in extraordinary detail: insect repellent, topical medicine, wood preservative, respiratory treatment. This knowledge was not new even at that time. Tang Dynasty records from the 7th century already described trade routes for products extracted from this tree, connecting the ports of southern China to markets across the Indian Ocean. In Japan during the Edo period, from 1603 to 1868, kusunoki cultivation was standard practice in farming communities. Families did not plant this tree for beauty. They planted it near the home for insect control. Crushed leaves were tucked into bedding at night. Wood shavings were packed into storage chests and wardrobes. Entire granaries were lined with planks of kusunoki lumber to prevent beetle infestations in stored rice. The tree served 3 purposes at once: shade over the house, protection from insects, medicine in the family cabinet, before window screens, before chemical sprays, before plug-in vaporizers on the nightstand. The tree was the entire system. The strongest evidence is in what the Japanese built with it. Kusunoki was the preferred wood for warships during the medieval period, not because it was the hardest timber available, not because it was the lightest to transport, because shipworms would not touch it. Marine insects avoided it completely. Wood-boring beetles that destroyed oak and cedar vessels within a matter of years could not penetrate kusunoki planks. The same wood was used to construct aristocratic storage chests. Silk kimono placed inside these chests remained completely free of moth damage for decades. No chemical was applied, no coating was added. The wood itself, releasing its compounds steadily into the enclosed air, did the work without anyone needing to do anything at all. By the late 1800s, the value of this tree had become impossible to ignore on the world stage. The product extracted from its wood and the leaves through steam distillation was called camphor. That is the name the Western world would come to know, if it knew anything at all. Natural camphor was one of the most valuable commodities on Earth. Taiwan, then under Japanese colonial administration, produced roughly 75% of the global supply. The Japanese government treated this resource the way modern governments treat petroleum. In 1899, they established a full state monopoly called the Taiwan Camphor Bureau. Camphor forests were guarded by armed patrols. Export was tightly controlled. Prices were set by the state. Military conflicts erupted over access to camphor groves in the mountain interior. This was not a folk remedy tucked away in a village healer's herb garden. This was a strategic commodity that shaped colonial policy across the entire Pacific region. And then the world changed. In 1903, a Finnish chemist named Gustav Kompa achieved the first total synthesis of camphor in a laboratory. For the first time in human history, the compound could be manufactured without the tree. Chemical companies in Germany, Britain, and the United States scaled production within 2 decades. Synthetic camphor was cheaper per unit. It did not require land. It did not require trees that took decades to reach maturity. It did not require a colonial monopoly on a remote island. The price of natural camphor collapsed. The incentive to grow, maintain, and harvest living trees evaporated within a single generation. But the real displacement came 41 years later. In 1944, the United States Department of Agriculture developed a new synthetic compound for the military. American soldiers in the Pacific and Southeast Asian theaters were losing more combat days to mosquito-borne illness than to enemy fire. Malaria alone was disabling entire battalions. The compound they created was DEET. It worked on contact. It could be manufactured in factories by the barrel. It could be packaged in small bottles and shipped in crates alongside ammunition. It could be patented. And in 1957, it was released for civilian use across the United States. Within a single generation, an entire population learned that insect repellent is something you buy at a store and spray on your skin from a plastic bottle. DEET was followed by picaridin. Picaridin was followed by permethrin-treated clothing. Then came plug-in vaporizer devices for bedrooms. Then citronella candles in decorative glass jars for patio tables. Then wearable repellent bracelets sold in blister packs. Then ultrasonic electronic gadgets that claimed to drive mosquitoes away with sound frequencies. Every new product opened a new revenue stream. Every new formulation generated a new patent application. Every new delivery mechanism created a new product category competing for shelf space in hardware stores and pharmacies. The industry did not solve the mosquito problem once. It solved it over and over and over again at increasing price points in increasingly elaborate packaging. By the 2020s, the global insect repellent market reached $6 billion in annual revenue. Every single product in that market shares one characteristic: it runs out. Every spray bottle empties. Every coil burns to ash. Every candle melts down to the glass. Every wearable band expires within 48 hours. The entire business model depends on repeated consumption. You use the product disappears, you return to the store, you pay again. A living tree standing in your backyard that repels insects simply by existing does not generate a second transaction. It does not generate a third. It does not generate a quarterly earnings report. The tree releases its compounds through a process called sublimation. At normal outdoor temperatures, the solid camphor molecules embedded in the wood and leaves slowly convert into vapor. This vapor drifts into the surrounding air. It creates a zone that biting insects actively avoid. The tree does not do this on a schedule. It does not do this for a season. It does this continuously, every hour of every day for its entire lifespan. And its lifespan is measured in centuries. Researchers have tested the essential oils extracted from camphor leaves against aggressive mosquito species like Aedes aegypti. In controlled laboratory tests, concentrated applications achieved repellency rates exceeding 90%, with some formulations offering brief protection times comparable to low-concentration DEET. One of the tree's primary compounds, linalool, is officially registered by the United States Environmental Protection Agency as a biopesticide with documented insect repellent properties. The science is not emerging. It is not theoretical. It is established, measured, and verified across decades of controlled research. Now look at the research landscape. Search any major medical database for DEET mosquito repellent. Over 2,000 published studies appear. Search for camphor tree mosquito repellent. Fewer than 80. The ratio is roughly 25-1. This gap does not exist because DEET is a better compound. It exists because DEET has corporate sponsors who fund clinical trials, publish favorable results, and submit those results to the regulatory agencies that decide what products reach your local store shelf. The camphor tree has no corporate sponsor. It has no marketing budget. It has no lobbyist in Washington or Brussels or Geneva. The studies that do exist come almost entirely from research institutions in Japan, Taiwan, China, Thailand, and South Korea. They were published in journals that Western medical databases historically did not bother to index. A critical finding published in Japanese reached no American physician. A discovery documented in Mandarin influenced no European regulatory decision. The knowledge was always there. It was always accurate. It was always available to anyone who could read the language. No one in the synthetic chemical industry ever had a financial reason to translate it. A camphor tree lives for centuries. Some specimens in Japan have exceeded 1,000 years. Some approach 3,000. Plant a single tree in your yard and it will repel insects from your property for the rest of your life. And your children will inherit it, and their children after them. No repurchase, no refill, no seasonal restocking trip, no subscription service, no coupon clipping. A $6 billion industry does not benefit from a product that works once and never stops working. Natural camphor cannot be patented. A living tree cannot be licensed. The act of crushing a leaf and placing it on a nightstand cannot be turned into intellectual property. Distilling essential oil from branches you pruned in your own backyard cannot be regulated, taxed, or controlled by any corporation on Earth. Every single characteristic that makes this tree valuable to a family makes it worthless to a shareholder. The pattern is always the same. Every benefit the camphor tree provides threatens an existing product category. Mosquito sprays, moth repellent pellets, termite chemical treatments, flea and tick collars, grain fumigation services. Each category represents billions of dollars in annual global revenue. Each category could be partially or fully replaced by a single tree that costs nothing after the day it goes into the ground. No corporation held a meeting about suppressing this tree. No boardroom conspiracy erased it from Western awareness. The mechanism was simpler than that. A product that generates no repeat revenue generates no advertising budget. A tree that needs no chemical inputs creates no market for chemical suppliers. A solution that lasts 1,000 years does not improve quarterly earnings. The system that promotes profitable products simply had no reason to mention the permanent one. 3 generations of Western families grew up buying insect repellent in plastic bottles under fluorescent lights, not because someone deliberately hid the tree, because nobody profited from telling them it was there. The camphor tree grows in USDA hardiness zones 9 through 11. In warm climates across the southern United States, Australia, and the Mediterranean, it thrives outdoors as a full shade tree. It reaches 15 meters or taller within a couple of decades. In cooler climates, it grows well in large containers and can be brought indoors for winter. It tolerates poor soil. It tolerates drought once established. It tolerates years of neglect. It grows fast. It demands almost nothing in return. Harvest leaves at any time during the growing season. Crush a handful between your palms and set them on a patio table, a windowsill, or a nightstand beside your pillow. The volatile compounds release immediately into the surrounding air. Mosquitoes vacate the area. Dry the leaves and stitch them into small fabric sachets. Place those sachets in dresser drawers, coat closets, and storage bins. This is the original moth repellent. It worked for 1,000 years before the chemical industry invented the synthetic white pellet and sold it back to you in a cardboard box. For concentrated use, the leaves and small branches can be steam distilled with basic equipment costing less than $100. The resulting essential oil can be diluted in a carrier oil and applied to exposed skin. It can be added to a room diffuser. It can be mixed with water in a simple spray bottle. One seasonal harvest from a single mature tree produces enough essential oil for a family for an entire year. No industrial facility, no cold chain shipping, no plastic packaging destined for a landfill. One safety note: concentrated camphor oil is not meant for ingestion and should be stored away from young children. Diluted preparations and everyday proximity to the wood and leaves carry no documented risk. This is not a hazardous material. It is a compound that over 1 billion people across Asia have lived alongside safely for longer than most Western nations have existed. In parts of the southeastern United States, the camphor tree is classified as a problematic invasive species. because it spreads aggressively and can disrupt local ecosystems. Homeowners in these regions should avoid planting it in the ground and opt for contained patio pots instead. The tree has been standing in Japanese shrine groves for 1,000 years. It never needed a marketing department. It never needed a patent filing. It never needed a label listing 17 inactive ingredients on the back of a plastic bottle. It released its compounds into the air every single day and every single night. The insects left. The wood endured. The families slept through summer without a single bite. For 1,000 years, nobody needed to buy anything. The tree was enough.
Walk into any hardware store. The cleaning aisle stretches 40 feet long. Spray bottles lined up in rows. Each one promises to eliminate mold. Each one contains a proprietary chemical blend protected by trade formulation. The active ingredients are rarely patented because most of them cannot be. They occur in nature. What the companies patent is the delivery system, the nozzle, the surfactant mixture, the branded packaging. When the solution is a plant that anyone can grow in a pot on a windowsill, there is no recurring revenue, no licensing fee, no refill cartridge to sell, no quarterly earnings call to justify. The industry does not suppress these plants through some backroom conspiracy. It suppresses them through simple economics. What cannot generate a profit margin cannot generate a marketing budget. What cannot generate a marketing budget does not enter public awareness. 3 generations of homeowners have scrubbed mold with chemical sprays while the answers grew quietly in herb gardens around the world. The first compound is called terpenin 4-OOL. When this molecule contacts a mold spore, it does not inhibit growth. It ruptures the cell membrane. The spore does not recover. Laboratories tested this compound against Aspergillus and Penicillium. These are 2 of the most common mold species found inside homes. The kind that colonize bathroom grout and spread across damp ceilings. In controlled tests, the spores exposed to terpenin 4-OOL sun did not survive. The compound comes from a tree that grows across eastern Australia. Indigenous Australian communities used the leaves as wound treatment for thousands of years. European settlers ignored the knowledge until the 1920s. The tree is Melaleuca alternifolia. You know it as tea tree. Today, tea tree oil appears in premium cleaning products on store shelves. A branded spray bottle containing trace concentrations costs $12 to $18. Superficial botanical sprays cannot penetrate deep enough to kill hidden roots. Furthermore, unless you fix the underlying structural moisture source, such as a roof leak or high humidity, the mold will return, regardless of the spray used. The commercial product dilutes the compound to the bare minimum effective concentration, then charges a 400% markup for the label. A single tea tree plant grows in a pot indoors in most climates. It needs bright light and consistent moisture. The leaves produce oil continuously. You are not buying a product. You are growing a supply chain that never sends an invoice. The next compound is already registered as an antimicrobial agent by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. The registration number is public record. The compound is thymol. It does not merely slow mold growth, it collapses the fungal cell wall entirely. Researchers found that thymol stopped Aspergillus colonization at concentrations below 1%, less than 1%. The amount you would need to treat a bathroom wall fits on a fingertip. Thymol is the active ingredient in several commercial green cleaning sprays sold at health food stores and organic markets. The label says plant-derived antimicrobial. It does not say thyme. It does not show a picture of the herb. It does not mention that the compound originates from Thymus vulgaris, a Mediterranean herb that grows in a 4-inch pot on a windowsill. Thyme tolerates neglect. It tolerates drought. It produces leaves year-round indoors with minimal care. Millions of kitchens already have this plant sitting next to the stove. The homeowner uses it for roasted chicken. They do not know it kills the mold growing behind their refrigerator. A packet of thyme seeds costs less than $2. The branded cleaning spray containing its primary compound costs $11 for a 16-ounce bottle. The math is not complicated. The industry hopes you never do it. Now consider the mold species that homeowners fear most, the one that insurance adjusters identify by name, the one that remediation companies use to justify emergency pricing. One mold species homeowners fear most is Stachybotrys chartarum, often called toxic black mold because it produces hazardous trichothecene mycotoxins. Finding black mold in a home can collapse a real estate transaction overnight. Remediation for a single room starts at $2,000 and often exceeds $5,000. While the compound carvacrol found in oregano shows potent antifungal activity against Stachybotrys in closed petri dish laboratory settings, a living plant on your windowsill cannot produce or disperse these volatile compounds at the concentration or volume required to safely remediate a home infestation. Disturbing a dry Stachybotrys colony with an unformulated home spray can cause millions of toxic spores to aerosolize, creating a major inhalation hazard. The mechanism mirrors its antibacterial action. It attacks the fungal membrane, destabilizes the lipid structure, and the organism cannot maintain itself. The plant that produces carvacrol in high concentrations is oregano, Oreganum vulgare, the herb in the pasta sauce. The same volatile compounds that give oregano its sharp, pungent flavor are the compounds that make it lethal to black mold. This is a plant that seasons dinner and protects the house. A small bottle costs $20 to $30. The plant that produces the oil grows from a $2 seed packet and reseeds itself every year in a garden bed or a balcony container. The supplement industry packages the compound. The herb industry sells you the dried leaves for cooking. Neither industry tells you that the living plant on your windowsill is a mold killer. There is no profit in that sentence. The next two compounds have been studied for decades inside a branch of science that consumers almost never encounter: food preservation research. Mediterranean cultures stored grain, bread, and cured meat for months in climates that breed mold aggressively. They did not use chemicals. They used herbs. Researchers eventually confirmed what village kitchens had practiced for centuries. Rosmarinic acid and carnosic acid, two compounds found in high concentrations in a single plant, inhibit the mold species that destroy stored food. The studies appeared in food science literature going back 30 years. They confirmed antifungal activity against common spoilage molds at concentrations easily achieved with fresh or dried plant material. The plant is rosemary, Rosmarinus officinalis. Woody, drought-tolerant, and capable of surviving in poor rocky soil where almost nothing else grows. Everyone knows rosemary as a cooking herb. Almost no one knows it as an antifungal. The knowledge has existed in published research for 3 decades. It never crossed into household cleaning awareness because no company could monetize a rosemary bush. The plant grows outdoors in most temperate climates. It grows indoors anywhere with a sunny window. A single rosemary plant lives for years. Some specimens survive for 20 years or more. It asks for almost nothing and provides a compound that protects food, surfaces, and air from fungal colonization. The final plant contains a compound so effective that pharmaceutical companies have already built clinical products around it. They use it in antifungal formulations prescribed by doctors. They use it in dental treatments. They have filed patents not on the compound itself because it is a natural molecule, but on the delivery systems that contain it. The compound is eugenol. In laboratory testing, eugenol killed Candida species at concentrations comparable to pharmaceutical antifungal drugs, not similar. Comparable. The same effective range. Researchers documented this repeatedly across multiple studies over the past 2 decades. Eugenol is one of the strongest antifungal compounds ever measured in a plant source. It disrupts the fungal cell membrane at concentrations so low that the margin between the natural compound and the synthetic drug effectively disappears. The pharmaceutical industry knows this. They have known for decades. They built patented formulations around it. They charge clinical prices for products containing it. The plant that produces eugenol in extraordinary concentrations is clove, Syzygium aromaticum, a dried flower bud that sits in the spice aisle of every grocery store in the country for $3. The same compound that a pharmaceutical company wraps in a patented delivery system and sells through a prescription sits in a glass jar between the cinnamon and the cumin. The patent is not on the molecule. The patent is on the packaging, the branded name, the dosage form. The molecule itself grows on a tree in Indonesia and Madagascar and Zanzibar. It has grown on those trees for centuries. It will continue growing long after the patents expire. 5 plants, 5 compounds, each one tested in laboratories against the mold species that colonize homes. Tea tree, thyme, oregano, rosemary, clove. They grow in kitchen windows. They grow in backyard gardens. They grow in pots on apartment balconies. The mold remediation industry bills $6 billion a year spraying chemical blends onto bathroom walls. The cleaning product industry fills 40 feet of shelf space with branded bottles. The pharmaceutical industry patents delivery systems around molecules that nature produces for free. What grows in a 4-inch pot cannot generate quarterly revenue. What cannot generate quarterly revenue does not appear on a cleaning aisle shelf. The plants do not care about revenue. They just keep growing.
Picture a farmhouse in southern England sometime in the 1600s. Stone walls, thatched roof, a root cellar packed with potatoes and grain for winter. Mice should be everywhere. They are not. Walk around the foundation and you will notice something growing at every doorway. A low, dense plant with dark green leaves and square stems, deliberately placed where the wall meets the ground. This is not decoration. This is pest control. And every farmer's wife in the village knows exactly what it does and why it is there. Travel forward 100 years to colonial Pennsylvania. German settlers clearing new land, building new homes, facing the same rodent problem that has followed human civilization since the first grain stores in ancient Mesopotamia. These families did not carry traps across the Atlantic. They carried seeds, small pouches of dried herbs tucked between clothing and tools. Within the first growing season, those herbs went into the ground around every door frame, every window ledge, every gap in the log walls where something small might squeeze through. In the mountain villages of Japan, farm families bundled dried aromatic leaves and hung them near rice stores. In Korean households, sachets of crushed herbs sat inside grain jars. In the Mediterranean, Greek and Italian homes grew specific plants in terracotta pots along exterior walls. The same principle on every continent, the same result in every kitchen. Mice stayed away. None of these families read a research paper. None of them understood receptor pathways or volatile compounds. They understood something simpler. When this plant grows by the door, the mice do not come inside. When it does not grow there, they do. Knowledge survived empires. It survived plagues. It survived centuries of war and famine and migration. It did not survive the 1890s. In 1894, a man named William Hooker filed a patent in the United States for a spring-loaded snap trap. A simple device, a wooden base, a metal bar, a trigger plate. It cost pennies to manufacture, and it could be sold in every general store in America. The snap trap offered a definitive mechanical end to a household pest, something a doorway plant could never completely guarantee, but it could be packaged, shipped, and sold for profit. The plants could not. Within 2 decades, hardware stores across the country stocked snap traps on their shelves. Within 4 decades, chemical companies introduced anticoagulant rodenticides. Warfarin-based poisons entered the consumer market in the 1950s. The pellets worked slowly. A mouse ate the bait, wandered back into the wall, and bled internally for days. The product required constant repurchase. A box of poison lasts a few weeks, then you buy another box, and another and another. By the time your grandparents were raising children, the herb at the doorway was gone, not because it stopped working, because nobody was selling it to them anymore. The knowledge skipped a generation, then it skipped another. Now most people alive today have never heard that a plant could keep mice away. They have only heard of traps and poison. That is a market. The global pest control industry today generates over $23 billion in annual revenue. That number covers everything from commercial extermination services to the glue traps you buy at the hardware store on a Saturday afternoon. The mouse and rat control segment alone accounts for billions. Snap traps, glue boards, bait stations, electronic traps, ultrasonic plug-in devices. Every product in that aisle shares one feature. You have to buy it again. Glue traps dry out and lose adhesion. Snap traps break or lose their spring tension. Poison bait gets consumed and must be replaced. Ultrasonic devices need electricity around the clock, and multiple studies have shown that mice adapt to the sound frequencies within days, rendering the devices useless. Every solution on that shelf is designed to be temporary. A temporary solution to a permanent problem is a subscription. Now here is what they do not put on the packaging. Anticoagulant rodenticides do not only kill mice. A poisoned mouse becomes slow and disoriented. It stumbles into the open. A barn owl sees easy prey. The owl eats the mouse. The poison transfers. The owl dies. This is called secondary poisoning, and it kills tens of thousands of raptors, hawks, foxes, and household cats and dogs every single year across North America and Europe. The poison you place behind your refrigerator may end up killing the owl nesting in the tree behind your house. The industry has known this for decades. The products remain on shelves because the products generate revenue. Now consider what a potted plant generates. Nothing. No repeat purchases, no replacement cartridges, no subscription fees, no quarterly earnings for shareholders. A plant that grows in a pot, returns every spring, and keeps mice out of your kitchen is economically invisible. It cannot be advertised because there is no margin in it. It cannot be researched at scale because no corporation will fund a study that makes their products unnecessary. Search any major medical database for rodenticide efficacy studies. You will find thousands, many of them funded directly by chemical manufacturers. Search that same database for botanical rodent repellent studies. You will find a fraction. The ratio is not explained by effectiveness, it is explained by funding. The money flows toward patentable solutions. A plant that anyone can grow in a $5 pot cannot be patented, so the research goes elsewhere, the knowledge stays buried, and you keep buying traps. The plant is peppermint, Mentha piperita, and the reason it works is not because mice dislike the smell, it is because the smell causes them physical pain. A mouse has over 1,200 olfactory receptor genes. You have roughly 400. A mouse experiences the world through scent the way you experience it through sight. Everything a mouse knows about its environment comes through its nose. where the food is, where the predator is, where the safe path runs along the baseboard in the dark. That nose is the most sensitive instrument in the mouse's body. It is also the most vulnerable. Peppermint leaves and peppermint oil contain a compound called menthol. When you smell menthol, you feel a cool, tingling sensation. That is because menthol activates cold sensing receptors in your nasal tissue. The sensation is mild for you because your receptor density is low and your brain filters the signal. A mouse has no such luxury. At the concentrations a living peppermint plant produces, especially in an enclosed space like a doorway or a gap beside a pipe, the menthol hits those receptors with overwhelming force. While menthol triggers a cool sensation in humans, a mouse's incredibly dense olfactory system perceives it as an overwhelming, intense sensory overload. In an enclosed space, this irritation is powerful enough to make a foraging mouse choose a path of less resistance. The pain receptor fires, the brain registers danger, and the animal turns around. This is not a preference. This is a survival reflex, and it triggers every single time the mouse encounters that concentration of menthol at close range. While mice easily habituate to ultrasonic sounds, the intense aroma of pure menthol remains a constant sensory disincentive. However, unlike a physical burn from a hot stove, if a mouse is hungry enough, it can and will tolerate the scent to reach food. Now here is what you do with this information. Method 1. The potted plant barrier. While a living plant will not block a hole physically, placing bruised, fresh peppermint near potential entry points creates an active scent barrier that encourages mice to look elsewhere. One critical point: do not plant peppermint directly in the ground unless you want it everywhere. This plant spreads through underground runners called rhizomes, and it does so aggressively. A single plant in open soil will colonize an entire garden bed within one season. The POT is not a limitation. The POT is the control strategy. Keep it contained, keep it at the entry point, and let it do its work. Peppermint is a perennial. In most climates across the United States, Europe, and temperate Asia, the plant dies back in winter and returns on its own every spring. You buy it once, you water it when the soil feels dry, you trim it back occasionally to encourage fresh growth because younger leaves contain higher concentrations of menthol than older ones. That is the entire maintenance requirement. One plant, one pot, years of rodent deterrence at each entry point. Method 2. The oil on cotton technique. This is for the places where a living plant cannot go: inside your walls, behind your stove, under your sink, inside the cabinet where you keep cereal boxes, inside the crawl space beneath your bathroom, anywhere indoors where you have seen droppings or heard scratching. Buy pure peppermint essential oil, not fragrance oil, not peppermint extract from the baking aisle, pure essential oil from the plant, Mentha piperita. The bottle will cost you between $8 and $15 and it will last months. Take a cotton ball or a cotton pad. Apply 10 to 15 drops of oil directly onto the cotton. Place that cotton ball at the suspected entry point or activity area, behind the refrigerator, along the baseboard where the wall meets the floor, inside the gap around the dryer vent hose, near the water heater closet. Anywhere a mouse has been, put a saturated cotton ball. The oil evaporates over time. Refresh each cotton ball every 10 to 14 days. In winter, when heating systems dry out indoor air, you may need to refresh weekly. In cooler, more humid spaces like basements and crawl spaces, the oil holds longer. Adjust based on what you observe. The strongest approach combines both methods. Living potted plants at every exterior entry point, creating a perimeter barrier. Oil-soaked cotton at every interior pathway, creating a secondary defense line inside the walls and cabinets. The mouse encounters menthol at the foundation and turns away. If it somehow finds an alternate route inside, it encounters menthol again at the interior gap and turns away a second time. Layered defense. No poison in the food chain. No dead mouse decomposing inside your wall. No owl dying in your backyard. The plant does not care, that the pest control industry generates $23 billion a year. It does not care that no corporation benefits from your knowing this. It does not care that 3 generations of families bought traps and poison for a problem it solves by simply existing in a pot by the door. Peppermint has grown on this planet for thousands of years. It grew beside farmhouse doors in England before the Industrial Revolution. It grew in colonial American herb gardens before the patent office existed. It grew in monastery courtyards across medieval Europe, where monks documented its uses in manuscripts that still survive today. It is still growing. Right now, in nurseries and garden centers within 10 minutes of wherever you are sitting, a few dollars, 1 pot, a handful of cotton balls, and a small bottle of oil. That is the entire cost of solving a problem that an entire industry depends on you never solving. The knowledge was never hidden. It was just never profitable enough for anyone to remind you. Long before the first water treatment plant ever opened its doors, the cleanest water on Earth did not come from a factory. It came from a bog. In the northern latitudes stretching across Canada, Scotland, Scandinavia, and Russia, vast wetlands are carpeted with a soft green organism that has been growing for thousands of years. Not a tree, not a flower, but a moss, a living blanket spread across millions of acres of cold, wet, acidic ground. The water that flows through these wetlands is some of the purest found anywhere in nature, remarkably clear and hostile to many common bacteria that thrive in rivers and lakes just a few miles downstream. Indigenous peoples across North America understood this long before any scientists studied it. First Nations communities in what is now British Columbia used this moss for wound care because they recognized its antiseptic properties. Women across the northern forests used it to line birthing rooms and cradles. They packed it into cuts and gashes to stop infection. They stored food inside it, and the food did not rot. They drank from bogs. They did not get sick. Across the Atlantic in Ireland and Scotland, farmers buried wooden kegs of butter and cheese deep inside this same type of wet ground. Archaeologists have pulled some of those kegs out 1,800 years later with the contents still intact. While the cold helped, the moss played a massive role. Sphagnum moss creates a highly acidic, oxygen-poor environment. It releases complex sugars that bind to nutrients and lock up the microbial tools that bacteria need to decompose organic matter. For thousands of years, the people who lived closest to the land trusted this organism with their water, their wounds, their food, and their children. It was not primitive, it was not folklore, it was a system that worked, refined across generations and handed down without interruption. But the northern bogs were not the only place this problem was solved. Half a world away in the heat of East Africa, an entirely different plant was doing the same thing to river water, and doing it faster. Along the banks of the Nile in Sudan, families have been cleaning water for centuries using a method so simple it sounds impossible. They take the seeds from a fast-growing tree, they crush them into powder with a stone mortar, they stir that powder into a bucket of brown river water, and within 2 hours, the water turns from brown to transparent. No chemicals, no equipment, and no factory, just a seed and patience. In ancient Egypt, women rubbed their clay water vessels with crushed seeds from this same tree. Thousands of years before any government built a treatment facility, they already knew how to make foul water drinkable. In India, warriors were fed the leaves before battle to reduce pain and sustain energy. Across West Africa and South Asia, rural communities have known for generations that this one tree cleans water better than anything they could buy. The method works because the seed contains a natural protein that carries a positive electrical charge. When the crushed powder meets dirty water, those proteins grab onto particles of mud, bacteria, and suspended waste. They pull everything together into heavy clumps that sink to the bottom of the container. What remains on top is clear water, remarkably free of the organisms that cause cholera, typhoid, and dysentery. When researchers tested this method under conditions matching the traditional technique used in Sudanese villages, turbidity dropped by 98%. bacterial counts fell by 90 to 99.9%, comparable to chlorine disinfection from a seed that grows on a tree in someone's front yard. This knowledge was never secret. It was never locked behind a wall. Women in Sudan still do this today. Farmers in rural India still use it. Communities across a dozen nations have passed the method from parent to child for centuries. The answer was always there, always free, and always growing on a branch anyone could reach. 2 continents, 2 completely different organisms, both solving the same problem that a $40 billion industry now claims only chemicals can fix. But here's where the story turns. Walk into any municipal water treatment facility today, you will find enormous concrete basins filled with chemicals: aluminum sulfate, ferric chloride, polyaluminum chloride, chlorine gas. These substances are manufactured in industrial plants, loaded onto tanker trucks, and delivered on recurring contracts to every city and county that cannot function without them. And those chemicals do not just vanish after treatment. Trace amounts of aluminum and chlorine byproducts end up in the water that comes out of your tap. Studies have linked long-term exposure to aluminum in drinking water to neurological damage. Chlorine disinfection byproducts have been associated with increased cancer risk. While municipal water treatment is one of the greatest public health achievements in history, managing its industrial byproducts is a continuous balancing act. Now consider who does not have access to any of this. The World Health Organization reports that 1 in 4 people on this planet still lack safe drinking water. In 2022, roughly 1.7 billion people were consuming water contaminated with human waste. Every year, waterborne illness kills more than 1 million people. Nearly 400,000 of them are children under the age of 5, not from rare diseases, from diarrhea, from cholera, from infections that clean water would have stopped entirely. These people are not dying because a solution does not exist. They are dying because the solution the modern system provides requires infrastructure they do not have, pipes they cannot build, chemicals they cannot buy, electricity they cannot access, trained technicians they cannot afford. The cost of chemical treatment pushes most rural communities to drink whatever water is nearest: a river, a pond, a ditch filled with runoff after monsoon rain. And those sources are almost always dangerous. Meanwhile, a tree that grows natively in these tropical climates produces seeds that can clear 98% of muddy cloudiness from a bucket of water. No power required, no chemicals needed, and certain mosses can naturally bind to heavy metals and inhibit bacterial growth. Both organisms have been documented for centuries. Both are free. Both reproduce without any help from anyone. The problem was solved on 2 continents thousands of years ago. As modern cities grew, centralized chemical treatment became the standard for scaling up to millions of people. But it left behind rural areas that cannot afford the infrastructure, and the other half pays for every single month. The global water treatment chemicals market was valued at just under $40 billion in 2025. It is projected to reach nearly $70 billion by 2034. The largest and fastest growing segment of that market is coagulants and flocculants, the exact category of chemicals that a single tree seed replaces for free. A seed you crush with a stone mortar does not generate revenue for a company selling aluminum sulfate at industrial scale. A moss that prevents bacterial growth in a glass jar does not generate revenue for a company selling biocide treatments to municipalities. Neither organism can be patented. Neither requires a factory. Neither requires a supply chain or a sales team or a recurring purchase order. This is not conspiracy. This is capital allocation. A plant that grows in tropical soil and clears water in 2 hours cannot sustain a chemical supply contract. A moss that grows on a windowsill and kills bacteria on contact cannot sustain a biocide subscription. Both reproduce on their own. Both can be grown by anyone with sunlight and water. That is exactly the problem. One company did investigate. A water technology team in Minnesota read about this moss being used as wound dressings during the First World War and decided to test it in a laboratory. Years of research confirmed that the moss inhibits the growth of bacteria, algae, fungus, and mold. It removes and prevents bacterial biofilms. It stabilizes pH. The science was clear, the results were documented, but an organism that anyone can grow in a jar cannot be owned. And what cannot be owned cannot be sold at scale. However, scaling up a wild plant for billions of urban citizens presents massive logistical hurdles. Because you cannot easily patent or standardize a wild seed, big research funding often flows towards synthetic solutions instead. Now here are those two plants, and here is what they actually do to water. The first is sphagnum moss, the soft green organism that carpets peat bogs from Alaska to Finland to Siberia. It is not one species, but a family of over 300 species that share one extraordinary ability. They produce a compound called sphagnon, a complex sugar molecule woven into the cell walls of every leaf. Sphagnum does three things to water. It drops the pH to between 3.5 and 4.5. That level of acidity is hostile to most bacteria, parasites, and waterborne pathogens. It binds directly to proteins on the surface of microorganisms, not slowing them down, immobilizing them, removing them from the water entirely. And it grabs heavy metal ions, lead, copper, nickel, cadmium. In controlled testing, 70 to 95% of heavy metals were pulled from solution within the first 10 minutes of contact. This moss can hold 20 times its own weight in water. During the First World War, when cotton bandages ran out on the Western Front, field medics in France and Belgium packed wounds with sphagnum moss instead. A 2-ounce dressing absorbed up to 2 pounds of fluid. It was naturally antiseptic. Infection rates dropped. Thousands of soldiers survived wounds that cotton alone could not have managed. Volunteers across Scotland, Ireland, and Canada collected millions of these dressings and shipped them directly to field hospitals along the front lines. The second plant is Moringa oleifera, a fast-growing tree native to the foothills of the Himalayas and now found across sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Central America. Its seeds contain a positively charged protein that acts as a natural coagulant. When crushed seeds are stirred into contaminated water, the protein binds to dirt, bacteria, and suspended particles. It pulls them into heavy clumps that settle to the bottom of the container. Turbidity drops by 98%. Bacteria drop by 99.9%. And unlike aluminum sulfate or ferric chloride, moringa does not change the pH of the water. No secondary treatment needed, no chemical residue left behind. 2 organisms, one from the coldest bogs on Earth, one from the hottest lowlands, both purifying water, both available to anyone willing to grow them. Here on Garden Explained, we only talk about plants you can actually grow yourself. So here is how to grow these two, and here is how to use them. Sphagnum moss does not need soil. Take a clean glass jar or a wide, shallow terrarium. Place a layer of pebbles at the bottom. Set live sphagnum moss on top. Use only distilled water or collected rainwater because the chlorine in tap water will kill it. Mist the moss regularly. Keep the container in bright, indirect light. It grows slowly but continuously. It stays green year-round. Once established, it sustains itself with almost no input from you. A single jar of living sphagnum can last for years. To see how this works, place a generous handful of sphagnum moss in a glass container and let water sit in contact with it for 1 to 2 hours. This simple experiment showcases the natural ability of the moss to lower pH and bind metals. Keep in mind that while it is a fascinating look at the same organism that preserved food in northern bogs for thousands of years, wild moss contains its own natural bacteria and is not a replacement for modern tap water. Moringa grows from seed in warm climates, in zones 9 through 11 outdoors. In cooler regions, grow it in a large pot near a sunny window and bring it inside before the first frost. It grows fast. It can reach 6 feet in a single year inside a container. It tolerates drought once established and produces seed pods within 12 to 18 months. The seeds store dry for years. To treat water, take 1 seed per liter. Remove the outer shell. Crush the white kernel into a fine powder using a mortar and pestle. Mix the powder into a small amount of clean water to form a paste. Add the paste to the water you want to treat. Stir quickly for 1 minute, then stir slowly for 10 minutes. Let the water sit undisturbed for 1 to 2 hours. Watch the particles clump together and drift to the bottom. The change is visible. Brown water turns clear. Pour the clean water off the top through a clean cloth. Do not let treated water sit longer than 24 hours because the organic sediment at the bottom will begin to decompose. 2 plants, a jar, a mortar and pestle, sunlight, that is the entire system. A moss that grows in a jar generates 0 revenue for a chemical supplier. A tree that produces its own coagulant from seed generates 0 recurring contracts. Neither plant requires a patent. Neither requires a factory. Neither requires a single salesperson. The $40 billion water treatment chemical industry sells aluminum sulfate, ferric chloride, and chlorine on monthly contracts to cities and industrial facilities worldwide. An organism that replaces those chemicals threatens every line on the invoice. Sphagnum moss is sold at garden centers as a decorative terrarium accent and nothing more. Moringa is celebrated for its nutritious leaves, but the water purification power hidden inside its seeds is almost never mentioned in Western markets. The research funding follows the patents. The patents require control. These plants cannot be controlled. They grow, they spread, and they seed themselves without asking. 2 plants, 2 continents, and thousands of years of documented use. One grows in a bog, the other grows in a desert. Both purify water that kills 1 million people a year, and yet the industry selling you the alternative just crossed $40 billion.
The science confirms what every generation before the chemical age already practiced. The most effective home defense requires no purchase, no subscription, no annual service contract, and no poison residue on the surfaces where your family eats and sleeps. These plants never disappeared. They grow in drainage ditches and garden borders and neglected lots in every climate zone on every continent. The industry did not hide them. It just made sure you never had a reason to look.